Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from the strife-torn Ukrainian capital Kiev. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Over the course of the next 1 hour, India Today, with its biggest team of reporters on ground here in Ukraine, will get you a 360-degree view of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. From Kyiv to Kharkiv to Irpin to multiple other locations, we bring you our top stories from Ukraine.
Dozen days marked by damage and debris. Russia calls for city ceasefire, but shelling on. Day 12 combat gets more heated, visible.
The shelling in the
India Today war front reports go viral. Ukraine reduced to hellscape by bombing. India Today reports from 6 besieged cities.
Shelling in the backdrop is the Ukrainian army stalling the advance of the Russian forces.
India's most watched reporter goes live.
You can hear the shells. This is Irpin. This is where the fight is taking place even as we speak.
Unmissable evening broadcast from Kiev.
Irpin is the center of battle currently in Ukraine. Irpin is barely 21 kilometers from the Ukrainian capital Kiev. It is the heart of the battle, and India Today's team was reporting from ground zero in Irpin, where Russian soldiers and Ukrainian soldiers are fighting pitched battles. Russians to capture Irpin en route Kiev, and Ukrainians as a desperate attempt to save Kiev and stall the Russian advance at Irpin. India Today's Pawan Kumar and I bring you our top story.
For the Russians, the route to Ukraine's capital Kiev goes through Irpin, the small town bracing up for a major offensive by the invaders.
There are trees that have been cut and put on roads. There are barricades that have been set up across multiple areas here.
The Ukrainian army here is battle ready and is taking every possible step to stall a Russian advance.
They are shielding this city. They're protecting this city even as we speak. The shelling in the backdrop is the Ukrainian army stalling the advance of the Russian forces. A very crucial bridge has been destroyed, and this bridge has been destroyed. Now the shelling is closed. This bridge has been destroyed to prevent the Russians from moving forward. The effort is to stop them at Bucha. The effort is to stop them at Ostomel, and the effort is to stall them here at Irpin.
The Ukrainian army has a full-fledged battle plan in place to strategically block the enemy.
On this road, there are soldiers with anti-tank guided missiles. There are soldiers with surface-to-air missiles. Now, if the Russian charge comes and they're backed by attack helicopters, anti-tank guided missiles and attack helicopters both the anti-tank guided missiles will destroy the tanks. The surface-to-air missiles will destroy the helicopters or aircraft that accompany this Russian charge that is expected.
Amidst the heavy shelling, injured soldiers are being ferried out and supplies rushed into the city that has witnessed maximum airstrikes till now.
Every few minutes, there are ambulances that rush in from Irpin carrying injured soldiers and those who are desperate to leave. For example, one more emergency vehicle has just fetched up. It is bringing in people from Irpin. The International Red Cross also has food, medicines, water, doctors all on standby at this entry point. In vehicles and in hundreds, people are trying to flee Irpin at this point of time.
While men are staying behind to put up a fight, women and children are escaping from the city looking for safe zones.
It is heartbreaking to see how many women have come with just a small bag, taking whatever they can, finding whatever they can, and whatever they can carry, because it is not possible to carry just about everything when you turn up. Absolutely heartbreaking scenes.
A few brave ones have decided to stay back to help the men in uniform.
We don't know how long this is going to last.
Yeah, nobody knows. We are praying that it will not be long. But who knows? We need to be prepared. We need to be strong by God's grace. People are escaping, trying to survive, and we are here to just provide some basic food, tea, and now Red Cross is helping also.
Even after ceasefire announcements, Irpin is not letting its guard down. The city knows that it's only a matter of time before the huge Russian attack takes place. With Gaurav, Sawant and Geeta in Irpin, Bureau Report, India Today.
12 days of death and destruction, 12 days of Russian assault in Ukraine, and 12 days Russia still is not in control either of the largest city and the capital Kiev or the second largest city Kharkiv. And Russian attacks both on Kharkiv and Kiev are relentless. The fighting also taking place in multiple other centers, as our next report gets you details.
A tale of two cities. Two cities which Russia wants but does not have yet. The battle for Kharkiv has gone on for at least a week now, and Ukrainians have refused to back off, leading to an all-out confrontation on the streets of Ukraine's second largest city. Ukraine claims a desperate Russia is now targeting civilian settlements. 8 people died in shelling after a sleepless night in Kharkiv. Residential buildings were engulfed in flames as people lost their homes, their everything in war. With the situation becoming more volatile in Kharkiv, tens of thousands of people gathered at the railway station, desperate to get out and keep their families safe. Meanwhile, this is how the capital city of Kyiv looks. With Russian troops edging closer and closer, the airstrikes continue unabated, leaving behind a trail of destruction on the streets of the capital. Unbelievable that this is how the beautiful, bustling city of Kyiv looked just 12 days before the conflict began in Ukraine.
More than 100,000 people crossed the border to Kyiv. It's all men that will fight for our country.
Governor, the attack, we are told, is happening at Hostomel, in Irpin, in Bucha. How much time, in your appreciation, before this part of Kiev where we are, how safe is this, and how safe is this likely to remain?
It's very simple. Never. Never.
We've shown you how so many civilians have decided to take up arms. Women who've never picked up a gun, now armed to the teeth to defend their country. They're all geared up.
You need a tremendous amount of training to be able to do this, to be able to hold a gun, to be able to wear this life jacket, this vest, this bulletproof vest, and the helmet, which is also pretty heavy, and then go into combat to fight for Ukraine against the Russians.
The all-out Russian offensive has led to a fight like no other for Ukraine's mega cities, and Russia claims Ukraine is responding by attacking rebel-held territories. A massive explosion rocked an oil depot in rebel-held Luhansk, Moscow claiming Ukrainian forces were behind the attack. 12 days on, the fight for Ukraine continues. Russia wants to get control of Kyiv and Kharkiv. and reportedly hopes to end the fight by this weekend. But Ukraine has made it clear they will not go down without a solid fight. With Geeta Mohan in Kyiv, Bureau Report, India Today.
One missile after the other. 8 missiles rained on the Vinnytsia airport here in Ukraine. Russia almost has total air supremacy. Ukraine desperately requires additional aircraft, but it's pounding airfields. Russia is pounding airfields to ensure that the 14 airfields that it has been targeting should not be used by Ukraine. Ukraine has desperately been demanding a no-fly zone over this area, a demand that has not been accepted by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries. Russia has warned a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be seen as an act of war.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, but 8 back-to-back Russian cruise missiles hit Ukraine's Vinnytsia airport. This is how Vinnytsia Havrashovka airport looks like now. In pieces, shattered, completely destroyed. At least one person was reported dead as a result of the non-stop rain of Russian missiles. A warehouse caught fire and an administrative building was also partially destroyed. What followed? A strict demand from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He urged the West for the second time to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
Ми повторюємо кожного дня: закрийте небо над Україною, закрийте для всіх російських ракет, для російської бойової авіації, для всіх цих терористів. Зробіть гуманітарну повітряну зону без ракет, без авіабомб. Ми люди, і це ваш гуманітарний обов'язок захищати нас, захищати людей.
NATO has already turned down Zelensky's request once. A no-fly zone will bar all unauthorized aircraft from flying over the war-torn country.
We have seen it for the last 11 days, and you have seen it right now, that the destruction is happening now on the east side of Dnipro River and then on the west. However, without the no-fly zone over Ukraine, it seems like the whole Western world is just watching us being destroyed with no additional steps being taken.
Earlier, the world's largest aircraft, Anatov AN-225 Mriya, was also destroyed in the Russian attack on Hostomel Airport. Mriya means dream in Ukrainian, the dream that appears to have been shattered now with the aircraft reduced to wreckage.
Съемочная группа сейчас работает на аэродроме Гостомель. Отсюда до Киева чуть больше 20 километров. Сейчас этот аэродром контролируется российскими.
Several air bases in Ukraine have been completely destroyed with ballistic missiles since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine. Bureau Report, India Today.
The Russian forces are now marching towards Kyiv. Their aim is the capture of the Ukrainian capital, and the attack is relentless from multiple flanks. Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, multiple flanks are being targeted. In fact, Ukrainian President Zelensky now fears that the attack will not be restricted just from the north. These attacks are taking place, but he fears that residential buildings and urban centers, including Odessa, will be directly in the line of Russian fire, which means the Russians are advancing not just from the north, but also from the south. Our next report gets us details. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a unilateral ceasefire in 4 cities: Mariupol, Kyiv, Kharkiv and Sumy. Now, this gave hope to Indian students that they could be evacuated from Sumy. Sadly, Ukraine did not accept that ceasefire offer. Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to both President Vladimir Putin of Russia and Ukraine's President Zelensky in an effort not just to ensure the safety of Indian children, but also to bring about peace in this region. And relentless efforts are on from France, Israel, multiple other countries to get both the countries on the negotiations table and bring an end to the hostilities and the bloodshed.
On day 12 of invasion, amid raining missiles, rockets and shelling, a big Russian respite. A ceasefire coming into force in 4 embattled cities. Capital Kyiv, the southern port city of Mariupol, second largest city Kharkiv and Sumy. Russia said the respite will be for civilians who are awaiting evacuation. Russia also opened several humanitarian corridors in response to requests by French President Emmanuel Macron, who spoke to the Russian president. Russian forces said they are using drones to monitor the truce.
I hope that NATO will close the sky, and I hope that India, as Indian Prime Minister called to our president, will also be engaged in this process. And India is a great big country. Many Indians are in Ukraine. Many Ukrainians visit India. We have lots of connections and cultural things together, and we need to stay together, and I hope it will help us.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi dialed Zelensky and discussed evacuation of Indian nationals from Ukraine. The Ukraine president, in his tweet, appreciated Indian assistance. The Russian ceasefire is a massive boost to Indian efforts to evacuate stranded Indian students in the war zone.
बहुत ज़्यादा मतलब कह सकते हैं एक तरह से ख़त्म होने वाले हालात हैं. बंदा अगर रहेगा तो एक तरह से अपनी जान पूरी तरह से कुर्बान करने वाली चीज़ है, क्योंकि वहाँ पे कुछ नहीं बचा.
वहाँ पे जो हालात थे वो बहुत ज़्यादा ही ख़राब थे, क्योंकि हम लोगों को खाने पीने के लिए भी और किसी भी तरह की व्यवस्था नहीं थी, और वहाँ पे इवन फूड्स वगैरह सब कुछ खत्म हो गया था. हमें बंकर्स में रहने के लिए ही बोला गया था.
It also comes after Prime Minister Modi asked Putin to enforce a ceasefire to help in mission evacuation.
The main challenge remains the ongoing shelling there, ongoing violence there, and the lack of transportation. We are in touch with all concerned regarding possible movement. The best option for us would be a ceasefire, of course, that allows to get our students out. And in this connection, we have been strongly pressing both the Russian and the Ukrainian sides.
But many across the world and Ukrainian themselves are not buying the ceasefire at face value and pointing to how Moscow is notorious for flouting them.
Of course, it's good news. I mean, our hearts go out to the Indian students, but also to the Africans and whoever is there and civilian population. So there need to be a ceasefire. We have to get these people out, and we have to rescue their life. Now, only one person can do that, and that's President Putin.
No ceasefires Russia promised to do. No at all. The only one thing they was compromised from the last negotiations were humanitarian corridors only for a couple towns. And even though they didn't do their promise, the people were bombed, and the Russians used heavy shelling and heavy artillery.
Українці, сьогодні прощена неділя.
Instead of humanitarian corridors, they can only make bloody ones. Today, a family was killed in Irpin. A man, a woman, and 2 children.
Але сьогодні,
right down the road, as in a shooting gallery.
Хто не згадав взагалі про цей день?
Do not trust any word of Russians. They lie all the time. So first we agreed about ceasefires for the humanitarian people, in giving possibility to go out of Mariupol and Kharkov and other city, and then they start shooting on civilians.
Putin has already said that his attacks will stop only if Ukraine drops resistance. So is the ceasefire a genuine humanitarian gesture or a brief lull before an assault of never-before scale to break Ukrainian resistance? With Geeta Mohan in Kyiv and Paulami Saha in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Ukraine has changed in the past 12 days. Once a bustling country with cities bustling with life, now it resembles a World War II war-torn city. There are hedgehogs and roadblocks and concertina wires and tank obstacles almost everywhere. 12 days has devastated millions of lives in Ukraine. There has been death, there has been destruction, and perhaps life has changed forever for many. We bring you multiple images of Ukraine that will shock you stun you and horrify you.
Zaporizhzhia is a city in southeastern Ukraine on the banks of the Dnieper River. As per 2021, the city had a population of 722,713. It is also the site of Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant, now captured by Russian forces. Close to 2 weeks of Russian invasion has forced the inhabitants of the city to flee the war and destruction for safety. But Yulia couldn't. She had to stay back to take care of her ailing mother. But she sent her 11-year-old son on a 1,000-kilometer journey on his own to Slovakia.
My name is Yulia Volodymyrivna Pisechka. I want to express my sincere gratitude to all the Slovak customs officers and the volunteers in Slovakia who cared for my son. They helped him to cross the border on his own.
Zaporizhzhia Oblast, or the district, is known for its heavy industry. But with the Russian invasion, the city and the district now wears the look of a war zone. Kharkiv, in the northeast of Ukraine, was the first capital of the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine. In January 1934, the capital was relocated to Kyiv. During World War II, 4 battles took place for control of Kharkiv. Nearly 1/3 of Kharkiv's population became slave workers for Germans, while 30,000 were executed and nearly 100,000 people starved to death during the Nazi occupation of World War II. Post-war, Kharkiv was rebuilt in the architectural style of Stalinist classicism. In the next 3 decades, Kharkiv became the 3rd largest scientific and industrial center of the former USSR. In independent Ukraine, Kharkiv became the 2nd largest city after Kyiv. Russian tanks and shelling has left deep scars all across the city. Russia has called for a ceasefire in Kharkiv for the time being. On the Dnieper River, the capital city of Ukraine, with a population of 2,962,118, woke up in disbelief to the sound of sirens on 24th of February. This 7th most populous city in Europe has been waiting for Russians since that day. Now the bustling cities of Kyiv are empty. Air raid sirens have become a daily routine. Sirens sound day and night. The atmosphere is tense, and Ukrainian soldiers steer locals away from possible sites of conflict. Civilians started to leave the city, but some stayed back to defend their lives and the city that they loved. Closer to Kyiv airport, Antonov was captured by Russian troops, as was Kherson city in the south. Cities like Mykolaiv, Irpin, Chernihiv, and Vinnytsia have faced the wrath of Russian shelling.
Всім добрий вечір. Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу президента тут.
Good evening, everyone. Everyone from the Ukrainian leadership is here. Our troops are here. Citizens are here. All of us here are protecting the independence of our nation. Glory to our defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes.
Нашу державу. І так буде й далі. Слава нашим захисникам, слава нашим захисницям. Слава Україні.
Ми не пробачимо розстріли.
We will not forgive the shootings of unarmed people, the destruction of our infrastructure. We won't forgive hundreds and hundreds of victims, thousands and thousands of sufferings. And God won't forgive, not today, not tomorrow, never.
Ні завтра, ніколи.
But the war carries on.
Several people in Ukraine feel that President Zelensky and Ukraine has been led up the garden path by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries. The United States encouraged Ukraine to take on Russia. But now, NATO has decided it's not putting boots on ground, at least just not as yet. When it comes to supplying weapons, hardware, they are doing that, but Ukraine says it needs to be much more. Ukraine also wants a no-fly zone to be declared over the skies in Ukraine. That hasn't happened just as yet. And the fighter planes, America may have said that it has greenlit the supply of fighter planes, but which country will provide these fighter planes to Ukraine and when remains the biggest question.
Could these fighter jets be headed for Ukrainian service? Could Soviet-era fighter jets in Poland's possession be the answer to Ukraine's crying need for additional air power to counter the Russian assault? The United States has announced that NATO countries have been given the green light if they choose to send fighter aircraft to Ukraine. But there are no takers yet among any US allies in the NATO. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says talks are on with Poland for fighter aircraft for Ukraine. What this means is that if a decision is taken, Poland could supply aircraft, not fly it themselves, but train Ukrainian pilots to take those aircraft and use them against Russia. When it comes to air combat, Ukraine is no match for a far superior Russian air force. Outgunned, Ukraine has 67 fighter aircraft and is up against over 1,500 in service in Russia. Ukraine has only 34 attack helicopters and faces over 538 from the Russian invasion force. Poland was mulling providing old MiG-29s to Ukraine if compensated by modern US F-16s from Washington. But Poland is no longer ready to antagonize Putin by sending its jets to Kiev or let Ukrainians fly them. With the US itself developing cold feet over sending troops to rescue Ukraine, there's a slim chance of any US ally helping out Kyiv with jets for the foreseeable future. But more than finances, what Ukraine needs is anti-aircraft weapons, missiles, attack helicopters, and of course fighter aircraft. With NATO having no stomach to enforce a no-fly zone, Ukraine is desperate and feels a sense of betrayal.
There
was a NATO summit, a weak summit, a confused summit. A summit where it was clear that not everyone considers the battle of Europe's freedom to be the #1 goal.
With the West, and most crucially the NATO staying away from the war theatres, the Ukrainians are virtually on their own against mighty Russia. With Abhishek Bhalla in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
4,000 people have now been detained across Russia for protesting against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's a crime in Russia. People are being detained, they are being arrested, they are being dragged on the streets. But these protests continue. We will tell you about the protests in Russia. We'll also tell you about the protests that are taking place in other parts of Europe. But before we do that, 12 days of this war, many lives lost. Ukraine says 11,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the past 12 days. Russia, of course, has given a figure of under 1,000 killed and injured. But let me get you more about the protests that are taking place across multiple cities in Russia.
The war has entered day 12. And the anger in Russia is growing. The cry against Putin and his aggression on Ukraine is only getting louder. These are common people pouring into the streets of Moscow to vent their protest against the war. Thousands sloganeering in support of Ukraine. Multiple protests in major Russian cities shows how Russians are terribly unhappy with Putin's actions in Ukraine. Reports from Moscow say 4,300 anti-war protesters were detained and more than 1,700 citizens arrested in Moscow. The anti-war chorus is also rising around the world. These are protesters on the streets of Toronto, draped in Ukrainian flags, walking through a main avenue.
No fly zone! No fly zone! No fly zone!
I'm a citizen of Russia. I was born in Ukraine. And what Putin is doing now is must be stopped. We must, everybody, the whole world must stop him there. Otherwise, he will be at your death's doorstep tomorrow. And I burned my passport today because I'm not part of this war. I'm not part of this fascist war.
People gathered in hundreds in London's Trafalgar Square.
This is a dictator who's in our neighbourhood, so to speak, in our European neighbourhood, with ambitions to recreate, rebuild an imperialist Russia. This isn't going to end in Ukraine. This didn't end in Chechnya, it didn't end in Georgia, it didn't end in Crimea. It's not going to end with Ukraine. And I think, you know, the UK thinks it can avoid World War III, and I truly hope it can.
The chorus against the war is growing, with people from world aghast at the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Ukraine. Around the globe, Russian President Putin is being called a delusional lunatic and a bully. Bureau Report, India Today.
Love triumphs even in the times of war.